Hi, I'm Diane Myers from Texas Women's University. Today we'll be talking about PBIS in the classroom, structure. There are several different aspects of structure in the classroom, including the physical arrangement of your classroom, the decor and organization in your classroom, and the routines in your classroom, which we can think of as the embedded structure. Let's talk a little bit more about each of these. You might remember our three-term contingency from our previous module on behavioral basics. As a refresher, an antecedent is defined as any stimulus that precedes or occasions a behavior. A behavior is an observable and measurable act, and the consequence is what happens as a result of that behavior. Where in our three-term contingency would maximizing structure have an impact? If you're thinking it's an antecedent strategy, you're correct. The physical arrangement of a space can occasion appropriate behavior, and it can also occasion inappropriate behavior. If students walk into a well-organized classroom, they're likely to engage in behaviors that reflect that environment. If they walk into a classroom that's disorganized and chaotic, they may be more likely to engage in behaviors that reflect a disorganized environment. Teachers should be thinking about the physical arrangement of their classroom as soon as possible. They should think about it prior to the start of the school year, and you should also be thinking about it on a day-to-day basis, ensuring that the physical arrangement of your classroom is appropriate for each day's instructional activities. There are several different important qualities that the physical arrangement of your classroom can convey to students. These include an organized classroom, a safe classroom, a welcoming classroom, a comfortable classroom, and a cheerful classroom. Remember, the physical arrangement of your classroom will not take the place of competent teaching, but setting the occasion for success increases the chance for success. Remember, this is an antecedent strategy that is likely to occasion appropriate behavior. Important factors to consider when you're arranging your classroom include that you can see all of your students and that all of your students can see you. You want to make sure that your pathways facilitate traffic flow. Students and you are easily able to move between desks and between rows, and there's no clutter in the rows impeding progress. You want to ensure that students can see all demonstrations, presentations, whiteboards, and any other instructional materials. You want to make sure that frequently used materials are easily accessible for you and for your students. Make sure that students can easily be organized into groups. You can have them sitting next to the people you want them to partner up with, and you can pre-teach the expectations for how to get into groups. Try to make sure that you minimize distractions as much as possible. For students who are more easily distracted, consider seating them away from windows, away from doors, or away from other peers who might be potentially distracting. Remember, your classroom arrangement should be inclusive and meet the needs of all students, including those with required accommodations. If you know students are going to need preferred seating, or perhaps seating at the front of the classroom, plan for that ahead of time. Remember, maximizing structure is an antecedent strategy. It's something we do prior to beginning our instruction. There are different things that can impact your classroom management regarding physical structure, including your desk position. Sometimes having your desk at the front of the room can create a physical and psychological barrier between you and your students. Assigning seats is something that might impact the structure in your classroom. I always advise new teachers that assigning seats is a good idea for being able to learn students' names. Also, you can arrange who sits next to whom, which can be beneficial to your classroom management. And in addition, you can use preferred seating as a reinforcer if students are able to behave appropriately in their assigned seats. Also, think carefully about the decor in your classroom. Student work is always appropriate, but you want to make sure that you don't have too much decor so it becomes distracting to students. For more information on this topic and other ideas about physical arrangement of the classroom, please refer to the Student Services website, the PBIS section, on the AISD intranet. The more organized you can be as a teacher, the better for your students. Have a place for everything so you and your students know where to find necessary materials. Be a good model for your students. If you have an organized desk, your students are more likely to have organized desks. Keep your frequently used materials stocked and accessible. Label them so students will know where certain items reside. A large part of staying organized is establishing and maintaining predictable routines in your classroom, which we'll be talking about next. So far, we've talked about classroom structure, including desk arrangement. Do what makes sense for you based on the instructional activities in your classroom. Make sure you can see all of your students at all times. Think about the decor in your classroom. If you're concerned that it's too much, you should err on the side of simplicity. Make sure that your decor encourages appropriate behavior and maximizes efficiency. Be sure to have your expectations posted. Post student work to encourage student success. Post news that's important. Have your expectations and your class objectives visible for students. Think about what is necessary to have on display versus what isn't. Stay organized. Have systems and routines from the very first day of school for you and for your students, and make sure that students are aware of and explicitly taught your routines. The embedded structure in your classroom consists of those classroom routines. Remember, students and adults do better in environments that are predictable and stable when your expectations are clear. Once students are aware of the routines, normal events will prompt the execution of those routines, but you need to make sure that students understand and are taught the routines first. There are several examples of classroom routines that all students should know. These include the procedures for arrival and dismissal, how to ask for assistance. For example, do they raise their hand? Is it okay for them to call out? Should they indicate that they need your help by using a card system on their desk? Students should know what to do when they're doing independent work. Is it okay to approach the teacher's desk if they need help, or should they remain in their seats and raise their hand? Where do they turn in the work when they're through? Students should also know the expectations for group work. What is the appropriate volume level? How do they assign roles? How do they turn in their work? Students should know the routines for transitions both between activities in the classroom and between classes. There are also setting-specific routines to consider. Examples of these are lab procedures for a science class, cleanup procedures for an art class, the routines and expectations for a debate in a history class. In early elementary classes, some of our routines should revolve around our expectations for students being in centers. We can't assume that all teachers have the same routines. Students will experience different classroom expectations from year to year and often from classroom to classroom. That's why it's very important that we teach our own classroom routines specifically. Once a teacher has identified routines, you should define the routines within the context of your school-wide guidelines for success. For example, respect, responsibility, and being ready to learn. Remember, it's important for students to have an operational definition of the expected behaviors. We need to make sure we tell students observable and measurable ways to be respectful, responsible, and ready to learn. Those terms have different meanings for different people based on their own cultural histories. One way to operationally define our classroom routines within our expectations is in a matrix. Let me show you an example. This is a classroom matrix. You can see that on the left-hand column we have our expectations. Across the top row we have examples of classroom routines: group work, desk work, quizzes and tests, arrival, and dismissal. Within each box, we have specific behaviors that define that expectation within the context of that classroom routine. For example, showing respect during group work looks like offering ideas and completing all tasks. Being responsible during desk work looks like working silently and reading quietly if you're finished ahead of others. Being ready to learn looks like keeping your desk area clean and using scrap paper. The classroom routines will vary from classroom to classroom. This is your opportunity to define those expectations specifically for your own classroom. Again, we have our school-wide guidelines for success. We have the routines for the specific classroom setting, and we have positively stated operationally defined behaviors. That is, these boxes tell us what the behaviors look like and sound like in the classroom. As part of the activities for this module, you will be asked to create a classroom matrix. Wait a minute though. What if you already have expectations, rules, or routines established in your classroom? No worries. That's wonderful, and I'm very glad to hear it. Just tweak what you already have so it matches the matrix format. Here's an example of how that can be done. This teacher had classroom rules consisting of following directions, being respectful and polite to others, listening quietly while others are speaking, raising your hand and waiting for permission to speak, and staying in your seat unless you have permission to do otherwise. What this can look like in a matrix framework is here. You can define being ready as following directions, following transition signals, and listening quietly when others are speaking. All of the rules on the left are present in the matrix on the right. You too can change your classroom rules just slightly so they fit this format, so we can have consistency across our classrooms. Thank you for your attention, and if you need more information, please refer to the Student Services intranet website or consult with members of your campus PBIS team.